Have you ever stood in front of the mirror not to check your hair or your posture, but simply trying to remember what it felt like to feel like yourself? I'm Dr. David Morgan. I've been a urologist for over 35 years, and in that time, I've had the quiet privilege of sitting across from thousands of men in their 60s, 70s, and beyond who carry themselves with strength, with grace, with wisdom, and yet behind closed doors, whisper a different truth. They'll say things like, "Doc, it's not just about sex. It's about feeling like a man again." Or, "I still love my wife, but I don't feel connected to myself anymore." And when they say that, I don't hear failure. I don't hear weakness. I hear a man who's still alive, still yearning, still capable of so much more than he's been told. See, what most of us weren't taught growing up is that masculinity doesn't vanish with age, it evolves. But the body needs support. It needs the right signals, the right nourishment. And sometimes it just needs a quiet reminder that it hasn't been forgotten. Today, I want to offer you something that might surprise you. Not a pill, not a procedure, but 5 humble natural fruits, yes. Fruits that I've seen time and time again help men restore blood flow, rebuild testosterone, and most importantly, reconnect with that quiet current of confidence that once felt so natural. These aren't exotic superfoods. They're simple. Often sitting in your kitchen, overlooked, but used the right way, with consistency and care, they can awaken something vital without side effects, without pressure, without shame. So if you've been wondering whether this is just how it's going to be from now on, I invite you to stay just a few more minutes, because what I'm about to share might change the way you look at your morning routine, your plate, and even your reflection, gently, naturally, and on your own terms. And if any part of this message resonates with you, feel free to click like or leave a quiet comment. You're not alone, and neither am I. Let's begin. And now, if you're still here listening, reflecting, and perhaps quietly wondering to yourself, is there something simple I can do, just one small thing to feel more like myself again? Then I'd like to invite you to take one more step with me. What I'm about to share isn't a miracle cure. These are small, natural, accessible choices, but within them lies a strength many of us have forgotten. Over the years, I've witnessed quiet but profound changes in the lives of men who were patient and willing to care for their bodies again, starting with things that seemed ordinary, almost too simple to matter. Together, we're going to explore 5 fruits one at a time, each one a small piece of the puzzle that helps restore blood flow, hormones, sensation, and connection. And I'd like to begin with a fruit you likely already know well. It might be sitting in your fridge right now, sweet, small, easy to eat, yet inside it holds a compound that can gently improve circulation, awaken vitality, and revive a part of you that may have felt lost. This isn't something you'll feel overnight, but if you're willing to walk this path with me steadily, day by day, your body will start to remember. Remember what it means to feel alive again. So let's begin with that small fruit. Just a handful each day, but enough to begin a journey. I remember a quiet autumn afternoon a few years ago when Gerald, a 68-year-old former mechanic, sat across from me with a look of quiet hesitation. He wasn't the type to speak openly about personal things. Stoic, composed. But that day, after a long pause, he finally said, "David, I don't feel like myself anymore." Just that, but I knew. He wasn't talking about performance. He was talking about disconnection, about losing the sense of confidence, control, that quiet current of knowing your body is still yours. I've heard it before, and often the first step back isn't dramatic. It's something as simple as a small handful of red grapes each day. Now, red grapes might seem ordinary. You can find them in the grocery store, at the farmer's market, maybe even already sitting in your fridge. But what makes them extraordinary is what lies just beneath the skin, a compound called resveratrol. Resveratrol is a natural antioxidant, but what matters most for men over 60 is how it supports vascular health. You see, when erections become softer, slower, or absent, it's often not about desire. It's about blood flow. And the truth is, the penis is a vascular organ. If blood isn't moving freely, if your vessels are stiff, narrowed, or inflamed, the signal doesn't get through. No amount of stimulation can override that. Resveratrol works by helping blood vessels relax and expand. It supports the production of nitric oxide, a molecule your body uses to improve circulation, the very same process involved in healthy erections. More oxygen-rich blood delivered to the right places at the right time. When I introduced this idea to Gerald, I didn't suggest anything drastic. Just one small habit, a handful of red grapes a day, eaten with the skin that's where most of the resveratrol lives. No pressure, no promises of overnight change, just a quiet, nourishing act of trust in his own body. About a month later, he came back. He smiled subtly, but something was different. He said, "I'm not saying I'm 20 again, but something's returning. A little in the morning, a little at night. It's waking up slowly." And I smiled back, because I know. It's not that grapes are magic. It's that when a man begins to believe his body can still respond, that's when the change begins. Sometimes it starts with red grapes, a small handful each day, enough to get the blood moving, enough to help the body remember what aliveness feels like. And sometimes that's all it takes to begin. A few winters ago, I had a longtime patient named Martin come in for his usual checkup. He was 72, retired from teaching high school, and had been married for over 45 years. I always admired how devoted he was to his wife, kind, thoughtful, the kind of man who still opened the car door for her. But that day, something was different. He sat down, folded his hands, and said quietly, "Doc, I don't know how to explain it. We're still close, still love each other, but lately I feel far away, like I'm not fully there." His words weren't about dysfunction in the physical sense. They were about disconnection from his body, from intimacy, from his emotional spark. That conversation led us to a deeper place, and one of the simplest yet most impactful recommendations I gave him that day was Cherries. Now I know what you might be thinking: how can something so small, so ordinary, make a difference in something as complex as desire or connection? But sometimes the smallest things are what help the most, especially when they work with how the body truly functions. Cherries, particularly the darker, ripe varieties, are rich in compounds called anthocyanins, natural antioxidants, that help reduce inflammation in the blood vessels. When inflammation goes down, circulation improves, including to the places where sensitivity, arousal, and performance all begin. That alone is helpful. But what makes cherries uniquely powerful for men over 60 is that they're one of the few natural sources of melatonin, the hormone responsible for deep restorative sleep. And this is where everything connects. See, during deep sleep, your body doesn't just rest, it repairs. It balances hormones, it produces testosterone, and without quality sleep, especially in the second half of life, testosterone production drops, cortisol rises, and the emotional and physical spark that fuels intimacy fades. That's what was happening with Martin. He wasn't just tired, he was hormonally flatlined. And it wasn't age, it was lack of deep rest. So we started with something gentle, a small bowl of cherries in the evening, sometimes fresh, sometimes frozen, always unsweetened. It became part of his nighttime rhythm, a signal to his body that it was safe to slow down, to release, to heal. About a month later, he came in with a softness in his face I hadn't seen in a while. "I'm sleeping better," he said. "But more than that, I feel like I want to reach for her hand again. Not out of habit, but because I feel close." That's the kind of shift I wish more men knew was possible. Not a dramatic transformation, but a subtle, steady return to self. So if you've been feeling distant, disconnected, or emotionally flat, I encourage you to try this small ritual. A handful of cherries, not for the sweetness alone, but for what they help restore: rest, rhythm, and the quiet chemistry of closeness. After improving your sleep, as we explored with cherries, the next thing your body often needs is internal fuel to help reignite your hormonal system. And when we talk about testosterone, not just as a lab number, but as that deep, steady sense of energy, desire, and aliveness, there's one fruit I often recommend to my older male patients: papaya. I remember a man named Frank, someone I've referenced often in quiet seminars with men over 60. Frank was 70 at the time, a retired middle school principal. He walked into my office looking relatively healthy, no major diagnoses, but his voice was tired. "Doc," he said, "I eat well, I walk every day, but I still feel like the engine's running with no fuel. No complaints, no drama, just emptiness." What he was describing was a disease. It was the subtle hormonal decline, especially of testosterone, that so many men experience as they age. The good news is, the body can often recover if you support it the right way, and papaya can be part of that support. Papaya is soft, easy to digest, and often overlooked. But inside, it holds key nutrients for men's health. Vitamins A, C, and E, which reduce inflammation and support healthy hormone production, natural digestive enzymes, especially papain, which ease the load on your gut, and that matters more than you might think. You see, the adrenal glands which help produce testosterone are sensitive to stress, inflammation, and poor digestion. If your body is constantly stressed just trying to process meals, there's not much left for vitality. But when you calm your gut, when digestion becomes smooth again, your body starts to shift energy back toward balance, toward restoration, toward strength. With Frank, we began simply, half a cup of ripe papaya every morning, either on its own or blended with a spoonful of Greek yogurt and a pinch of cinnamon. No complex diet changes, no drastic rules, just consistency. About 3 weeks later, Frank came back. He smiled and said, "You don't need to check the labs, my wife already noticed." She told him, "You're humming in the kitchen again," and that one small moment said everything. I never promised papaya is a miracle, but Eve's seen again and again how a small, steady ritual can help a man's body remember its rhythm. Not overnight, not in fireworks, but gradually, gently in how he moves, in how he feels, in how he connects. So if you've been feeling flat, foggy, or like your spark has dimmed, consider starting your morning with a little papaya, not just for its sweetness, but for that quiet feeling of returning to yourself. Once we've begun to restore energy and support healthy testosterone, as we touched on with papaya, the next step is to protect the foundation. Because no matter how strong your drive is or how good your circulation becomes, if there's discomfort, pressure, or inflammation in the pelvic region, intimacy becomes something you endure, not something you enjoy. And in men over 60, one of the most overlooked culprits is silent inflammation in the urinary tract, around the prostate, and throughout the lower pelvis. It doesn't always show up as pain. Sometimes it's just a lingering tension, a need to urinate more often, or the fear of interruption during moments of closeness. That's why the next fruit I want to talk about is one I recommend often, especially to men who've started avoiding intimacy out of worry or discomfort. Cranberries. Let me tell you about Harold, 67, a retired mail carrier who came to see me after nearly a year of avoiding physical closeness with his wife. He loved her, that was never in question, but every time they tried to reconnect, he felt a pressure, an urgency, or worse, the fear of needing to run to the bathroom midway through. He said to me, "Doc, it's not that I don't want to, I just don't trust my body anymore." That kind of quiet vulnerability takes real courage. And it's more common than most men realize. Because when the pelvic floor is inflamed, when the prostate is swollen, it's not just a medical issue, it's an emotional weight. That's where cranberries come in. Not the sweetened kind you find in baked goods, but the real ones. Cranberries are rich in a compound called proanthocyanidins, which have been shown to fight harmful bacteria, reduce inflammation, and support the delicate blood vessels and tissues in the lower urinary tract. They help reduce urinary urgency, prevent infections, and support prostate comfort, making it easier to relax, to feel safe, and to be present during intimacy. For Harold, we didn't start with anything extreme. Just a small handful of unsweetened dried cranberries with lunch, or a few ounces of pure unsweetened cranberry juice in the afternoon. Not because it would change everything overnight, but because it created a daily rhythm of support. A few weeks later, he called me and said something I still remember. I didn't realize how much tension I was holding until it was gone. He was sleeping through the night, feeling more at ease. And for the first time in over a year, he and his wife made love without fear, without rushing, without interruption. That kind of shift doesn't show up in a blood test, but it shows up in the eyes, in the way a man holds himself, in how safe he feels in his own skin. So if you've been dealing with that quiet pressure, whether physical, emotional, or both, consider making cranberries a small part of your day. Not because they're a miracle, but because they clear the path gently, gradually for comfort, confidence, and closeness to return. If you've stayed with me all the way to this point, I want to say thank you, not just for listening, but for allowing yourself to be open. Together, we've explored 5 simple fruits: red grapes, cherries, papaya, cranberries, and pomegranate. They're not exotic or hard to find, but hidden within these everyday foods are powerful compounds that can help restore blood flow, support hormone production, ease inflammation, and perhaps most importantly, reconnect you with your own body. I didn't make this video to encourage you to chase after your younger years. And I don't believe growing older should be something we simply endure. I made this because I've sat across from enough men, good men who once felt strong, dependable, present, and who quietly confess they no longer feel like themselves. And I want you to know, there's still a path forward. There are still choices. There is still healing if we meet our bodies with patience and respect. Taking care of your sexual health after 60 is about turning back time. It's about returning to presence, to the quiet joy of holding your partner's hand and feeling connected, to the dignity of waking up and thinking, my body is still mine. I still feel alive. And if you're wondering where to begin, just start small. A handful of red grapes in the afternoon, a bowl of cherries before bed, a few slices of ripe papaya in the morning, not because they're a cure, but because they're a promise, a quiet act of care you offer to yourself saying, I'm still here. I still matter. If something in this message resonated with you, if it made you feel seen, understood, or simply not alone, I invite you to click the like button so I know you're out there. Leave a comment if you feel comfortable, even if it's just the number of the fruit you'd like to try first. And if someone in your life might benefit from hearing this, a friend, a brother, a fellow traveler on this path, share it with them. Not for me, but because they deserve to know that aging does not mean emptiness. Thank you for being here. We're still walking, and every step, no matter how small, is enough to begin the journey back to yourself.